Get him off my flight deck. Commander Rachel Voss said it without raising her voice, which was the specific register that meant she was not asking. She stood at the edge of the catapult track on the forward deck of the Ronald Reagan, the Pacific wind coming off the port side at 31 knots. The flight deck doing what flight decks do when an aircraft carrier is at general quarters with launch operations suspended, producing an emergency frequency of organized motion that had nowhere to go. Around her, 14 air wing technicians in their colored jerseys crouched over the catapult breech assembly in the various postures of men who had been working the same problem for 47 minutes and had produced nothing but incremental certainty that they did not know what was wrong. The old man she was looking at had arrived on deck 11 minutes ago. He had come up through the island from below. Where he had been, no one had initially been able to say, and he had walked across the flight deck with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who knew where the catapult track was without needing to look for it. He wore a khaki coverall issued to shipboard maintenance contractors, the kind you saw everywhere on a carrier and therefore did not see anywhere, and he carried a canvas tool roll under his left arm. He was not in anyone's way. He was simply present, standing 12 feet from the breech assembly with his hands at his sides, watching the 14 technicians work with the quality of attention of a man reading a problem he has seen before. His name was Leonard James Kowalski to anyone who had known him long enough, and he was 83 years old. He was not large. He was the build of a man whose body had been maintained through 30 years of serious physical work and 23 years since of the ordinary physical work of a man who still moved through the world correctly. His face carried the specific weathering of someone who had spent years on open decks in maritime air. The skin, the color, and texture of good Cordovan leather worked to suppleness. His hands, when they were still, had the quality of instruments at rest, large, precise, with the dense knotted architecture of serious use. His eyes, pale as winter water, possessed behind their age the specific depth of a man who had looked at technical problems in very high-stakes situations for a very long time, and had learned to see what others had not yet learned to look for. Petty Officer Second Class Donna Garza, yellow jersey, catapult crew, 23 years old, had been the one to notice him first. She had looked up from the breech assembly to find him standing there, watching, and had felt the particular discomfort of civilian eyes on restricted deck operations, and had gone to the island to report it, which had reached the flight deck officer, who had reached Commander Voss. "Sir," said Chief Petty Officer Marcus Tran, the Catapult Division Chief, without looking up from the assembly. "We've been through the hydraulic sequence 4 times. The accumulator pressure is within spec. The shuttle position sensors are reading nominal. The retract cylinder is, I know what you've checked," Voss said. She was still looking at the old man. "Who authorized a contractor on my deck during a casualty?" "Working on that, Commander. Work faster." She moved toward the old man. The wind took her hair under the helmet and flattened her coverall against her. "Sir, this is a restricted area during flight operations casualty. I need you to go below." The old man looked at her. His pale eyes registered her rank, her expression, the situation behind her, and something in the register of his attention changed slightly. Not deference, exactly, but the acknowledgement of a professional addressing a professional. "The problem is in the breech latch housing," he said. His voice was a low, unhurried sound, as though the 31-knot wind and the flight deck machinery were simply the ordinary background of conversation. "The secondary detent spring has fatigued. It's reading seated because the sensor contact is still making, but the spring tension is below the threshold for positive lock under full catapult load. The shuttle will move to launch position and the fault will hold it there. You won't see it in diagnostics because the sensor logic was designed for a catastrophic spring failure, not a gradual fatigue outside the normal replacement interval." Commander Voss was quiet for 2 full seconds. Behind her, Chief Tran had straightened from the assembly. He was looking at the old man with an expression that had shifted from task focus to something else. The expression of a man who has just heard his problem described with a precision he had not been able to apply after 47 minutes of working it. "Who are you?" Voss said. "I'm with the shipboard maintenance contract team," the old man said. "I came aboard in Yokosuka. That doesn't answer what I asked." He looked at her steadily. "Leonard Kowalczyk," he said. "I used to work on these systems. Catapult systems. C-13 Mod 2 catapults, C-13-1s, and C-13-2s. The Reagan's running the C-13-2 variant on the forward tracks." He paused. "I helped design the C-13-2 secondary latch assembly in 1987. The detent spring material spec was a compromise we made under cost pressure that I argued against at the time. The replacement interval in the current maintenance manual is 120 days longer than I recommended. That interval has probably not been revisited in 30 years. The flight deck had done something in the past 10 seconds. The noise had not changed, the wind, the machinery, the distant jet engine runs from the aft deck, but the quality of the human activity around the catapult had shifted. The way a room shifts when the sentence being spoken turns out to be the sentence that matters. The 14 technicians had not stopped working. But they were listening. "Commander," Tran said carefully, "if he's describing what I think he's describing, we have a disassembly and inspection we can do. It's a 40-minute procedure. If he's right about the spring..." "If he's right," Voss said. She looked at the old man. He was watching her with the patient attention of a man who has been in enough situations where decisions mattered to understand that the decision was hers and the patience was his to provide. "What do you need?" "Your best hands on the breech latch housing. I'll direct." She looked at him for one more moment. Then she looked at Tran. Then she made the call that commanding officers make when they have evaluated the available options and determined that the unconventional one is the right one. "Chief, put him on the breech assembly. Give him whatever he needs." What followed was 41 minutes that everyone who was on that deck would describe, for the rest of their careers, as the most instructive 41 minutes they had spent on a catapult system. The old man did not touch the assembly himself. He directed, precisely, in the specific technical language of a man who knew these systems at the level of their original design, the level below the maintenance manual. The level where the decisions had been made about why things were built the way they were and what the failure modes looked like when the building decisions turned out to have been wrong. He described what he expected to find before it was found. He described the exact spring rate deviation that constituted a fail condition. He described the specific visual indicator on the spring coil, a slight asymmetry in the compression set visible only under certain light angles, that would confirm his diagnosis before measurement. When the housing came apart and Petty Officer Garza held the spring to the light at the angle he had indicated, she found it in 7 seconds. She looked at him. "It's there," she said. "Exactly where you said." He nodded. He did not say "I told you so," because the kind of man he was did not operate in that register. He simply moved to the next step. The spring was replaced from the parts stores he had directed them to before the disassembly began. The housing was reassembled to the torque specifications he provided from memory. Specifications that matched the original design documents and differed in 2 instances from the current maintenance manual. In ways, the manual had been updated incorrectly during a revision in 2003. The catapult was functionally tested. It cycled clean. The flight deck was live again in 2 hours and 7 minutes from his arrival. Commander Voss stood at the edge of the now operational catapult and watched the first aircraft hook into position with the particular relief of a commanding officer who has seen her ship returned to its purpose. Then, she turned to find the old man rolling his tools back into the canvas roll with the methodical care of someone who maintained his instruments the way you maintained anything you depended on. She crossed the deck to him. The wind had eased slightly. The afternoon light was coming off the Pacific in long horizontal bars that made the flight deck surface look like hammered bronze. "Where did you train?" she said. He looked at her. Something in the question had found a different register than the operational conversation they had been having, and something in his expression acknowledged it. "Puget Sound Naval Shipyard," he said, 1963, then the Catapult design program at Lakehurst, then 15 years at the Naval Air Engineering Station. He paused. "Then things that took me somewhere else for a while." "What things?" He was quiet for a moment. His pale eyes moved out to the Pacific, to the flat, enormous expanse of water that surrounded the Reagan in every direction, blue-gray and indifferent and very old. "Service," he said. It was one word, and it contained something that did not require elaboration. Voss looked at him. He was rolling the canvas tool roll, and his hands were moving with the precise, practiced ease of hands that had done this 10,000 times. On the inside of his left forearm, visible where the sleeve of the coverall had ridden up during the disassembly work, there was a tattoo. Old. The lines thickened and blued with age, a unit designation that she had seen once in a classified naval history briefing and had not expected to see on anyone she would meet in the ordinary course of her career. She looked at it for a moment without speaking. He noticed her looking. He did not pull his sleeve down. "Is that?" she began. "Yes," he said. She was quiet. Then she said, "You're not on my contractor manifest." "No," he said. "I'm not. How did you get aboard?" He looked at her with the same steady, unhurried attention. "The same way I got aboard every ship I was ever on," he said. "Someone needed something done, and I knew how to do it." The specific quality of that answer, its plainness, its absolute lack of mystification, the way it refused to be anything other than what it was, stopped Voss in a way that more elaborate answers would not have. She stood on the flight deck of the Ronald Reagan in 31-knot Pacific wind, and looked at an 83-year-old man in a contractor coverall who had just restored her ship's primary launch capability after 47 minutes of failure by 14 trained technicians. And she understood in the specific way that commanding officers understand things when the situation has clarified past the point where hierarchy explains it, that she was in the presence of something she did not have a category for. Petty Officer Garza had been watching from 12 feet away. She had been watching since the housing came apart, and the spring was found exactly where the old man said it would be. She had been watching the way young people watch when they are in the presence of expertise they cannot fully evaluate yet, but can feel the weight of. She had seen the tattoo. She had seen Commander Voss look at the tattoo. She had made a decision before Voss finished speaking. She walked to the island. She found Chief Tron in the Catapult control station reviewing the test data. She told him what she'd seen on the arm. She described the tattoo as precisely as she could. Tran looked at her for a moment. He asked her to describe it again. She described it again. Tran turned to his console. He found a number that was not in the ship's directory, the kind of number that had been given to him years earlier by a master chief who had said, "You will probably never need this, but if you ever do, you will know why I gave it to you." He dialed it. The call connected to a duty officer at Naval Air Systems Command, Patuxent River. Tran described what he was calling about: the tattoo designation, the man, the catapult repair, the maintenance design knowledge, the C-13-2 secondary latch assembly. He said the name, Leonard Kowalczyk. The silence that followed was 3 seconds. When the duty officer's voice returned, it had changed in the way voices change when a name lands with weight behind it. "Say the name again." Tran said it again. Where is he now? Forward flight deck, Reagan. Pacific Operations Area. Stand by. The line went quiet. Not dead. There were sounds, movement, the distinct audio texture of an office responding to something. Then a different voice came on, older, carrying the specific authority of someone who does not take duty officer calls and has taken this one. Chief Petty Officer Tran. I need you to confirm the physical description. Tran described him. The tattoo. Left forearm. Is it a unit designation or a trident variant? Designation, sir, don't say it on this line. A pause. I need you to keep that man on the ship. Do not let him leave when you make port. I'm authorizing a transit to your location. I will be aboard within 18 hours. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Does he know you've called? No, sir. Another pause. The voice was quiet for a moment, in the way of a man making a rapid private accounting. Then, good. Don't tell him. He'll just find another way off the ship. A beat. He does that. The call ended. Tran sat at his console for a moment. He thought about the phrase "he does that," delivered by a flag officer he had never spoken to before, with the familiarity of a man describing someone he had known for a very long time. He thought about what that familiarity meant. What kind of history produced a flag officer who knew, without needing to be told, that the man would find another way off the ship if warned. He thought about the Catapult, about 47 minutes of failure and 41 minutes of resolution, and the difference between the two. He went back to the flight deck. The sea was doing what the Pacific does in the late afternoon, deepening its color from blue-gray to something darker and more serious, the horizon line going sharp and clean as the sun dropped toward it. The Reagan moved through it with the contained mass of something that did not ask the ocean for permission. The aircraft on the flight deck were being repositioned for the evening launch cycle, moving in the choreographed precision of a system that had been restored to its purpose. Leonard Kowalczyk was standing at the forward edge of the deck where the flight deck met the open air over the bow, looking at the Pacific. His tool roll was under his arm. He was not doing anything. He was simply standing in the wind and the light, looking at the water with the quality of attention of a man who has spent a significant portion of his life at sea and for whom the ocean is not scenery, but a fact. The fact that had organized his world for decades. Voss came and stood beside him. She did not say anything immediately. She had served long enough to know that certain moments did not require words to be filled. After a while he said, without turning from the water, 1968, the first ship I was aboard as something other than a technician. We were in this ocean. That's all I can tell you in a non-classified setting. A pause. It was important work. The kind that doesn't get written down right away, and when it does, most of it stays redacted for a long time. He was quiet. I think about it sometimes. Not with regret. Just the way you think about things that were the fullest version of what you were capable of. The moments when everything you were was being used. Voss was quiet. The wind moved between them. Why maintenance contracting? She said. He turned to look at her. His pale eyes, in the late Pacific light, had the quality of the water, deep and complicated and not requiring anything from the depth. Because these ships matter, he said. Because the systems on these ships matter, and the people who know them best are the people who built them, and most of those people are old now or gone. Because a C-13-2 secondary detent spring has a fatigue life that the maintenance manual got wrong in 2003, and somebody was going to find that out eventually, and I preferred to find it before it became what it was going to become. He paused. And because I'm 83 years old, and I can still do the work. There's nothing complicated about it. The lead aircraft of the evening cycle was being positioned on the catapult track behind them. The flight deck crew moved with the precision of restored operation, each person in their role, the system doing what it was built to do. Garza was at her station, yellow jersey, watching the hookup sequence with the focused attention of someone who had been changed by the afternoon and was processing the change while doing the job, which was the only way the job allowed you to process anything. She would write about it later, in the notebook she had kept since boot camp. The notebook her grandmother had given her, who had been a Navy wife for 22 years and who had told her to write down the things that mattered, because you wouldn't always know they mattered until you tried to write them. She would try to write down the afternoon, the 47 minutes of failure. The old man with the canvas tool roll, the spring found exactly where he said it would be, the way he had described a design decision he had argued against in 1987 as if it had been last week, as if the 37 years were simply the interval between the error and the consequence, and he had been patient enough to span the interval. She would try to write it down. She wouldn't quite succeed, because some things resist the sentence. But she would keep trying, on other ships, in other ports, in the specific ongoing attempt to find language for what it looked like when someone who understood a thing at its deepest level walked onto a deck and did the work. 18 hours later, a vice admiral came aboard from a Navy helicopter, in a way that was not in the ship's schedule, and was not announced over the 1MC. He crossed the flight deck with the contained urgency of a man who has been in transit since he received a phone call and has been thinking the entire time about what the phone call meant. He found Leonard Kowalczyk in the Catapult maintenance space, where the old man was reviewing the maintenance manual with Chief Tron and identifying 17 additional entries that reflected the 2003 revision errors. The Admiral stopped in the hatchway. He looked at the old man bent over the manual with his reading glasses and his pen and his large, knotted hands moving across the page. He looked at him the way you look at someone you have not seen in a very long time who has remained, in memory, exactly as they were, and now you are looking at the years between then and now, and what the years have done, and what they have not done. Leonard looked up. He saw the Admiral. Something in his expression moved through several things in rapid sequence. Surprise, recognition, the particular expression of a man who has been found in a place he did not expect to be found, and who is not certain whether to be pleased or resigned, and who resolves on something in between. "I should have known Tran would call," he said. "He called the right number," the Admiral said. He came into the space and stopped 4 feet from him and raised his hand to the sharpest, most breathtakingly precise salute that Chief Tran and the 2 technicians in the maintenance space had ever seen, delivered by a vice admiral to an 83-year-old contractor in a khaki coverall, in a Catapult maintenance space in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Tran came to attention involuntarily. The 2 technicians followed. Leonard Kowalczyk looked at the Admiral. His pale eyes moved across the man's face and found what was there, 30-something years of service since they had last been in the same classified space together, the rank accumulated, the authority earned, the specific human being behind the stars. He stood. He returned the salute with the precision of a man who had learned what precision meant from people who did not survive imprecision. The Admiral lowered his hand. He looked at the maintenance manual on the table, at the 17 flagged entries, at the man who had been carrying the knowledge of those errors for 20 years and had finally been in a position to do something about them. "How many ships?" he said. "The C-13-2 variant is on 11 carriers," Leonard said. "The Reagan, the Bush, the Lincoln, the Truman, the Stennis, the Washington, the Vinson, the Eisenhower, the Nimitz, the Roosevelt, the Ford." He paused. "All of them have the same maintenance manual. All of them have the same detent spring replacement interval. All of them have the same risk." The Admiral was quiet for a moment. The ship moved beneath them, 3,000 miles from the nearest coast, the Pacific indifferent above and below and in every direction. "Why didn't you?" he began. "I tried," Leonard said. 2003, when the revision was published. I submitted a comment to the maintenance program office. It was reviewed and declined. My contract had ended. I didn't have standing to escalate. He paused. "I've been getting back on ships when I can, finding the right interval. Waiting for the right failure." A pause. Today was the right failure. The Admiral looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm convening a maintenance review board. All 11 carriers. You're going to be the technical advisor." He paused. "You can't keep doing this alone." Leonard picked up his pen. He looked at the manual. "I know," he said. "I've been doing it alone because I didn't have another option." He looked at the Admiral. "Now I do." He turned back to the manual. The pen moved. The ship moved under them. The Pacific went on in every direction, enormous and unconcerned as it had always been. There are men who built the systems that protect everyone else and who carry the knowledge of those systems' flaws for decades, because the systems that were supposed to receive that knowledge had no mechanism for it. They get aboard ships any way they can. They find the right failure. They wait for the moment when the problem and the person who understands the problem are in the same place at the same time, and then they do the work, and then they move to the next one. They do not ask for recognition. They ask for a maintenance manual and a good technician and enough time to correct 17 errors before the ship makes port. The floor they mop is hallowed ground. The catapult track they fix carries aircraft that carry the people who carry everyone else home. They know what they're working on, even if no one else does. If you were moved by Leonard's story of quiet genius and timeless dedication, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for more stories of America's unassuming heroes.